Hey, it's MykonosFan. I just wanted to take some time today to talk to you about SteamWorld Dig 2. When I first got my PS4 in, let's say like I think it was late 2014, like right around Christmas, SteamWorld Dig was one of the first games I tried playing, and over the years, every now and then I'd jump back into it and play like 20 or 30 minutes, and it just wouldn't click, and I'd bounce off it. But for some reason last month, I decided to sit down again and try it, and I got really hooked on it. I really liked... I got really addicted by the loop of just going down into the mines, because SteamWorld Dig is basically about digging down into the earth, getting treasures, completing these like challenge rooms, and advancing the narrative, you know, to get your next objective. Then heading back to the surface, selling off the materials you're getting, and investing that into upgrades for yourself. You know, it's... I hate this term. It's so weird to me, but Metroidvania, it's that kind of style of game where you'll get new upgrades that'll let you go to new paths and make things easier and stuff like that, and you're always investing into yourself and getting, you know, better and being able to handle yourself in battles and stuff like that more capably. You know, it's basically a platforming Metroidvania kind of thing, focus. And I just finally dug into that last month, and I was reading about the game online and realized there was a sequel this year. And I was like, I remember hearing so much about the first game when it came out, and not that much about this game. So I thought, well, okay, let me reach out to the developer and see if I can get a code and talk about this to you all. So I reached out to Image Informed Games, and they very generously gave me a review copy of the game, so I instantly love it. No, but they gave me a review copy, which is very kind of them. So I'd like to talk about this game to you all, because I know there's a lot of great games coming out this year, and it's like every time you turn around, there's like a new game coming out everyone says you have to play. But after playing this and enjoying it, I didn't want this one to get lost in the shuffle. I thought I would like to put this in front of you, and you know, I'm not going to like command you and urge you to go buy it. You know, there's a lot of shit this year, but I want you to at least consider this game and keep it in the back of your mind at the very least, because I think it's a very charming little game with a lot of hooks in it. And I think if you haven't tried SteamWorld Dig and you kind of like Metroidvanias, you'll probably like this game. If you didn't like the first game, this one's not going to change your mind. It's very much more of the same but better. But if you like that first game, or you're open to what you've seen or what you're about to see, I think you'll actually find something that you'll quite enjoy. So in the first SteamWorld Dig, you played as a character called Rusty, and as you bore down into the earth, you discovered, you know, all this technological stuff. I don't want to spoil it, but basically the universe is like a mining world, steampunky kind of thing. Everyone's like robots, and you vanquish a certain evil in that game. And one of the characters in the hub world town you would interact with was Dorothy. And she's actually the protagonist of this game. So in this game, you're Dorothy looking for the protagonist of the first game. So if you haven't played the first game and you're jumping into this one, I feel like this game is very standalone. You can definitely jump right into this one, because the plot wasn't too intensive in the first game. But being that this is a plot about finding a character from the first game, you know, you may jump into this and not exactly care, right? Like, sidebar, I was trying to get into Witcher 3 a few weeks back, and basically the gist of it is go find this girl, and it's like, well, I don't know if she was in the other games, but I don't really know this character, so I'm having trouble getting my head around it. So, you know, I think this game is very standalone, but there's going to be a lot of talk about finding Rusty, that character, and if you have no attachment to Rusty, aka like you didn't play the first game and get attached and invested in it, you're not really going to care that much. You're going to be like, well, why does he matter this much for all this trouble, right? So that's like the one thing I'd say, maybe go play the first game, not only for that, but because the first game's, you know, enjoyable too. But this game's definitely focusing a lot on finding this guy, and it'll really help you to have some investment in the first game, I think, unless you think you can get by with that. But yeah, so the narrative in this is basically go find Rusty, and also, oh man, some of that tech from the first game is still around, and like, what's up with that? And there's earthquakes and all this stuff. You got to get to the source of it, figure out what's going on. I feel like this game, you know, it definitely has more text than the first game. It'll definitely stop you a bit more to give a little exposition or wax about the state of the world or what's going on, but it's never overbearing, and it's it's never too much text. I was never sitting there going like, oh my god, let me play the game, you know, I'm just mashing X. I was never doing anything like that. I was always at least, you know, mildly into what was going on. And there are a lot of times where the game, you know, it won't stop you, but it'll say like, if you want to progress the narrative, you know, go talk to this character once again in this one place. And there is a warp system, so it's usually just like a couple-minute endeavor. So they make it very convenient for you. There is one time where the plot necessitates going a different route to a certain character, and that was, yeah, at first I got to that and I was like, oh my god, here we go. You know, making like a jerk-off motion with my hands. But no, like you just go somewhere else and it takes like an extra minute, and you're like, okay, you know, they did this well. They did the thing where they stopped the convenient warp system to a certain point, but you can just go warp a little farther away and get right back there quick. So I just want to say kudos to them on introducing that, but then still keeping it very convenient on doing that kind of thing. Overall, the plot, you know, I don't want to spoil too much. I feel like the game doesn't pay off incredibly well, considering it's all about a search for this character. Like 2/3 through the game too, the game starts playing with like some slightly meta things. I don't want to say too much, but there is like a system reboot kind of thing. And I was watching this unfold and I'm thinking like, oh man, like SteamWorld's going to get fucking crazy now, you know? Like it's playing with these concepts and like there's these huge things that'll basically instant kill you. So I'm thinking like, oh man, like when am I going to upgrade and be able to defeat those, you know? And it doesn't pay off. That stuff just never really goes anywhere. Like you come back after like a system reboot kind of, you know, fourth wall thing, and it's just like, oh, that was weird. Okay, well, let's go talk to this person. And it just never really goes back to that. And that was kind of a shame, because I felt like that was getting into some really unexpected territory from this game. It was tying in well with the technological stuff, and I really would have liked to have seen that gone somewhere. But other than that, you know, I think the game has a good reason for existing. It's a very serviceable plot. You know, it's basically just an excuse to do more of the SteamWorld Dig gameplay mechanics, and hey, that's good for me. You know, it's not too intrusive. It's charming enough. The dialogue's nice. The characters in the hub world are fun. You know, it's probably nothing that's really going to stick with you, but hey, you know, it's not bad at least, right? So, when it comes to this, basically you start out with a pickaxe and you go down to the ground, you know, into the mines basically, and you can just shoot straight down. In this game, you can kind of deviate more left and right, but for the most part, there's a vertical chasm with all kinds of enemies and traps and things, and different like strengths of dirt. So in the starting area, one swing of your pickaxe will, you know, dissipate a dirt clod and you can move down. Think like Dig Dug, kinda, that kind of stuff if you're unfamiliar with this. And eventually, you know, it'll take 2 swings on certain dirt patterns, or 3 swings, and that's where you go back to your upgrades after you find ores underground. If you take the upgrades back to the hub world, you know, if you go all the way up or you find a warp point to get back, there is a little mechanic dude, and you can sell stuff to him and get money and reinvest into yourself. And now this game introduces a thing called upgrade cores, and you'll find these little gears in the world. Usually in challenge rooms, they're kind of hidden in a way that you kind of got to scratch your head and figure out how to get to it, and it's your reward. And you can put these gears are basically upgrade points, and as you progress through the game and buy better equipment will unlock upgrade slots, and it'll be a thing where it's like, put 3 gears into your water bomb launcher and you can shoot water bombs in midair, and that can be very helpful. It doesn't sound very helpful, but that can be very helpful to shortcutting certain ore obtaining or challenge room progression. And the cool thing I really like about this upgrade system, it's basically a skill tree, but you don't really ever have to commit to it. You can always go back to that salesman in the hub world and say, okay, I don't want the mid-air water bomb ability anymore. I want something else right now. So I'm going to take those 3 gears out of this and put these gears elsewhere. And basically it just lets you respec and kind of play the game you want to play, as long as you're finding enough upgrade gears. And I actually really got into that, and I went out of my way to find more upgrade gears so I could mess around with that stuff more. I thought that was a pretty interesting layer. that I'm really glad they introduced, because SteamWorld Dig 1, I enjoyed all that, but while I was playing it, I couldn't help but think of like, man, I wish there was more, you know, more mechanics here, more systems in the background, like more ways to really flesh this out. And they did that. Another thing they did, there's an experience system now. So as you defeat enemies, you'll get experience points and level up. Every time you level up, you get a bonus for selling the ore you collect. So as you level up, you're getting a bigger and bigger percentage boost on your selling, and it all just goes back into yourself, and eventually, you know, late in the game, you'll come back up and get like 700 gold pieces, you know, whereas in the first area of the game, you'll maybe come back up and get like 20 or 30 gold pieces. So it just feels good. It makes the numbers go big, and if you know me, I like making numbers go up. So I really like seeing this game lean into all that stuff. There are a lot of extra weapons and tools, a lot returned from the first game, and some are new. Like there's a jetpack one you get later in this game that, you know, everything eventually gets to a point where it makes progressing through the mines a cinch, and it makes you feel way stronger than you did in the start. It's awesome. I really like all that stuff. Whew, okay, gameplay systems. At its core, like, this is still a pretty basic game, you know. A lot of the challenge rooms and stuff basically just comes down to light puzzles and just thinking outside the box. There's never a thing where there's not often going to be rooms where you're like, I need to look up a guide. Like, what do they even want me to do? You know, you can always fiddle around a bit, mess around with the order you're doing things, and generally get past what you're doing. Now, there are some more complicated challenge rooms that are late game, and those are there if you get really into this, completely optional. You know, there's a good bit of game here for your money. I think it's $20 as the retail price. It's on PS4, Xbox One, I think Switch. I don't have a Switch, so I don't pay attention to that ecosystem, but I'm pretty sure it's there, and probably a great game on that system, and on Steam. So, you know, I really like all the upgrade stuff. I just want to make a quick note, because I'm sure someone at Image Informed Games is going to be watching this. Whoever made the decision in this game, one of the meters you had in SteamWorld Dig 1 was a water meter. So there you would find little patches of water in the first game, and you jump into it and it would automatically refill your water. In the first game, those little water patches, these little pouches of water would deplete as it filled you up, so you'd always have to be looking for more water. In this game, you get the refill and the water level stays the same, so thank you very much for that. The level design I found in this game is a lot more fun. I know when I said earlier it's just like a vertical stretch down that can deviate left or right, and there's like separate environments and areas in this game you go to, and that may sound restrictive, but it is definitely an improvement on the first game. The first game, you basically just went straight down, and there would be a point where the environment would change and it introduced new like hazards and stuff. But for the most part, you're always kind of lightly working your way a few blocks left and right and just working your way down. In this game, there's that straight narrow passage down, but you can find like a cave that will deviate into like a side wing of this huge map, and that'll have its own twists and things. It's just more interesting to explore. It's hard to explain, and I'm going to try not to show the map on the screen, because showing the map in a Metroidvania styled game probably isn't a great idea. You know, it's not procedurally generated or anything in that sense. But yeah, it's hard to really explain how it's just more fun in this game, but because it really is like kind of simple in its layout. You know, there's like a certain number of tiles left to right, and that's your play space. But I don't know, they made it more fun. They kind of pulled back in on some of the annoying things from the first game. Like in the first game, the second environment had these dripping, like kind of toxic poison acid things, and it would kind of erode away at certain blocks. And you know, if you were digging down far enough, if there was a straight way, the acid drop would drop all the way down, so you could be getting off-screened by certain drips of acid and getting hurt, and you're like, well, what am I even supposed to do? Like, I can't even see that. You know, I'm getting off-screen, basically, and I'm looking down and focusing on going down and getting hit from above. And that mechanic does return here, but I feel like you're just more capable of bypassing that stuff and dealing with it. And in where the toxic drips are in this game, it's more horizontally designed. You're going from like right to left instead of straight down. So that bypasses that issue quite smartly. It's little things like that where even if when they bring back in mechanics from the first game, it's done better in a way that you know, you're like, oh, thank God. Like, I'm not having to deal with that bullshit again. You know, it's here and it's designed smarter, and it feels like more of a fair challenge and not more of an annoyance. Because in the first game, it kind of made me enjoy playing it less, because I'm constantly taking damage, and it's like, oh, I gotta snake my way down through these things, but it's deteriorating through the patches. None of this makes any sense if you haven't played the game, but trust me, this game improves on it. Okay? It's just things like that. Like in the first game, it was weird, because like there were 3 distinct environments. In the first environment was the basic, like, here's some dirt, you're underground stuff, and that was probably my favorite part of the game. The second part had all the toxic and stuff, and enemy design was a little, you know, a little harder to deal with, so I was like, okay, this is kind of putting me off. The third area was a lot of metal and not as much dirt, and a lot of like lasers that could see a lot of the environment and always shoot at you. So as the game got on, it just got to a point where like you're constantly just fretting and in danger, and you do eventually get an upgrade to help with that. But you spend so much of that late game going like, oh my god, I'm so stressed, just let me get to this thing, let me get some health. This game doesn't really have that, and I'm very thankful for that. This feels like a much more even, balanced, I don't want to say easier game, but it feels like a more fair game when it comes to the level design and environmental stuff. I'm much more happy with this game. I still think the first one's worth playing, but you know, you'll definitely appreciate how this game treats you as a player much more. But yeah, I very much enjoyed this game much more in terms of the main minute-to-minute gameplay and all that stuff. The game also ultimately ends in a similar way to the first game. The first game basically said, like, go to these 3 places and shut down these things and then go fight the final boss. And you did that, and it kind of went by quick, and you went and fought the final boss, and it wasn't incredibly climatic, but, you know, serviceable. This game does a similar thing where it's like, go to these 3 places and shut down a machine and go fight the final boss. But in this game, where they place the 3 things, it feels like more of an expedition and a journey to get to those 3 things, even if they're taking place in areas you've already been to. But one of my 3 things was actually in an environment I didn't even explore until I was at the end of the game and it told me to go there. Also, generally, these are places you can get to before it tells you to. There's actually trophies and achievements for being like, oh, you got to this thing before the game even told you to, you know, your sequence broke, good job. So, you know, I don't want to misrepresent that as being a restrictive thing. You can get, you know, if you got the skills and you know what you're doing, you can get to those 3 areas. But, you know, to that point, when I got to this area, or this part of the story in the SteamWorld Dig 2, and it said go to these 3 places, one of them was an environment I didn't even really go to. I thought it was, you get to a point where there's like these bouncy, you know, kind of glow in the dark, luminescent mushrooms, and I kind of peeked my head in there earlier, and I guess I just didn't have an upgrade to really get through it that well at the time, or I just misunderstood some things there, and I was like, this is a weird little side area. And I forgot all about it until the end of the game, where it's like, there's one here. And I was looking around all over. I'm like, where is this place? You know, and I eventually looked it up, and I realized there's a whole area with those luminescent mushrooms I just did not explore at all. So I went through there, and I was getting all kinds of money, and I was like, God, you know, this is kind of cool that this game like has this entire area that I completely missed, you know? It made me think, like, what else am I missing in this game? And I thought that was pretty cool, and I'm glad the game eventually led my hand there to be like, hey, dumbass, like, there's a whole area here you forgot about, so one of the machines is here, go find it. But yeah, and the final boss in the first game, it was kind of, if you looked at it, it was kind of basically designed, but I liked it, and in this game, from a narrative perspective, it is a much better final boss, because it doesn't, I don't feel like it comes out of nowhere, but in certain attack patterns and stuff, I did feel a bit helpless. I don't want to, you know, the game is still recent, I don't want to get into it, but I feel like in some ways it's a much better final boss, and in some ways it's just not as great as a final boss. But from a narrative perspective, and generally from a concept, you know, idea perspective, I enjoyed this final boss much more than the last game. And this game doesn't throw too many bosses at you, so it's, you know, when you do find one, it's kind of novel. So that kind of helps them be a bit more impactful, I think. And this is a side note, but the hub world music in this game, I think it's fucking awesome. There's a lot of time, I spent 7 hours on this game earlier. Probably a good 20-30 minutes of that was just letting my character idle in the hub world just to listen to the music, because that hub world track's fucking awesome. And while talking about the presentation, I think the game is actually very visually appealing. I heard some critique of the first game is like, oh, it looks like a Flash game, and like I wouldn't say that about it, but this game definitely steps it up in so many ways. It's very appealing to look at. I just love looking at this game, honestly. I think it's really, really cool looking. I think all the lighting stuff's really great. I like the animation. I like watching the little robot characters do their weird things. I just think it's a really fucking cool looking game, you know? I think they did a great job on the art stuff. You know, so I spent 7 hours on the main campaign. I just want to point out, like, there are, you know, trophies and stuff for getting 100%. Or I guess it's not 100%, like there's no percent shown, but there are extra objectives like, oh, beat the game in like 2.5 hours, and then you're like, oh, how the hell do I do that, you know? And it's kind of a speed running thing, and you know, if you don't want to follow a guide, you could probably spend a lot more time in this game trying to go for all the trophies and stuff if you really dug into that. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what Image Informed Games does next. I'm sure there might be another SteamWorld kind of universe game, because the first game was a SteamWorld Tower Defense. Then there was SteamWorld Dig, and 2015 had SteamWorld Heist, which was kind of like a 2D XCOM kind of game. I didn't play that one, and now this one. But I'd like to see them do something new and original, and kind of make a new universe and play around with that, and maybe come back to SteamWorld later. But whatever they do next, they have my attention now, because I really enjoyed this game, and you know, hopefully this has convinced you to check this game out and see what's up with it, because I really don't think it, you know, it's kind of going under people's radars, and I really think it should get more attention than it's getting. But yeah, thanks again to Image Informed Games for letting me check out the game, and you know, hopefully this video had some value to you. See you later. This video was generously supported by the following patrons on Patreon. Thank you.